My name is Jill Barden. I was a couple other names along the way, but when I was hired at the college, I was Jill Moore, and that was in 1970. I was hired through Lenore Simpson Personnel, and I worked on the switchboard. At the time I started, the campus was just opening up, and my little cubicle was in the main block, down at the far end. I think it was 103 was the room number, and I was the afternoon switchboard operator, meaning I started at 2 and I worked till 10. And in those days, I didn't have a car and they didn't have buses here. So it was a bit of a challenge in the beginning until I got enough money to get a car to get out here. But anyway, I stayed on afternoons, it seemed like for a couple of years. The person who originally hired me was Keith Studman. Keith and a fellow by the name of Gemmel. I'm trying to, Frank Gemmel. Yeah. One day, because of the offices, they were down at 660 Olette, and I had to meet them, and they brought me out to the college. And basically, I was interviewed in the car for the job for the switchboard. Pretty much for the first few years, I just was a switchboard operator and minded my own business. And this old fellow named Elmer Hickey, he used to come in, because he was the afternoon supervisor for. No, he wasn't a supervisor at that time. He was just a worker, and he was the steward, and he used to come in and talk to me all the time. And he was the guy that kind of said, well, we have a union and there's a meeting and all that stuff. So he was originally one of the first union people that I was connected with. The funny story is that Elmer became management. So then it was Bob Ridley, and Bob he became the local president, and that was in, just coming up to the strike in the 70s, so late 70s. So I got a little bit active in the local, and somehow or other I ended up to be vice president. And I still don't know how that happened. But Bob, he and I worked very well together. He was, during the strike, he was the night captain, and during the daytime, I was the daytime captain. So we didn't get to see much of each other during the strike. We don't kind of catch it as things went by. And there was a real solid crew of people. Phil Arrow, Art, Ken Garber, Heather Millen. Heather was just unbelievable. She never come to the picket line, but she was on that phone every day and doing whatever she could do to help out. So there was a strong movement of stewards back when we first got that strike happening, January 79. It was, I knew nothing about unions. I knew nothing about strikes. I'd never worked full-time before. This was my first job, and this was my first experience with what do you do? And it was amazing the support people that came. The Windsor District Labor Council showed up, and other OPSEU locals that I didn't even know existed, the jail workers, they were all there, came to the picket line, supported us. So that was, the strike lasted 2 weeks. We basically said, hell no, we won't go back for 6%. And at the end of 2 weeks, everybody was frozen, and we all went back to work. For 6%. But what came out of that, which was very interesting, is that in each city where there was a CAT support local, there was people who were kind of pushed forward. And one example is Jim became a picket captain in Thunder Bay, strike captain in Thunder Bay, and there was 5 or 6 other people. I probably would remember the name Susie Valance from Seneca College, and every college had a very strong strike captain. And when we went to bargaining the next year, every single one of those local, either presidents or vice presidents at that time, became part of the bargaining team. So we, I guess it was, learned by fire. We all had our issues. Jim, in the technical end of it, was from Thunder Bay, and he was in the technology field. So we had computer staff that in that year that we negotiated that collective agreement that got a 25% wage increase in our first year after the strike. For the computer people? For all the computer people.
Everybody else got 16%.
And wouldn't you die to have 16% now? And I think that because each one of us had demonstrated such strength in our own individual colleges, we were able to put forward a team that they knew if they pushed us too hard, it wouldn't take much for us to go back and get on the picket line.
What year was that?
81, Jim? Yeah, 81. It was the first contract after the strike that we all ended up on the bargaining team in Toronto. And it was a real learning experience for me. I never been involved in bargaining and didn't know all the ins and outs, but each one of us took on a section that was we felt needed to be improved. And it went from even silly things like mileage from people driving from Windsor to our Chatham campus. So and bargaining for me was quite an experience. I came back. I should back up a little bit. I got into who the local presidents were, and it seemed that every time somebody got active in the union, management made them management. So right after the strike, Bob Ridley became management, and that's how I ended up being the next in line to become local president. So it was Elmer Hickey. There was somebody after him, I think, or before him, but each time the president of the local got active, they just moved him into management to kind of keep the union at odds. But we still carried on. I think partly the strike is what made St. Clair support staff as strong as what they were, even though in the beginning it didn't seem like it did much good. But we had everybody worked together. Art was our historian. Ken was our money man. Phil, during the strike, he was the guy that made sure there was wood for the fires, and Phil was our chief steward, and Phil was the chief steward for years and years and did a very good job for us. So that's kind of where I started in the local, became president in 70, and my job was the switchboard, and I was at the main canvas. And gradually it progressed into I became the telephone coordinator. So when new sections of the college were opening up and they had to have the phone lines installed, I was the contact with Bell Canada. And I did, even at the very beginning when I started the college, went back to Mercer Street and had to go from room to room looking for where the different telephones were, because we were transferring the phone system out to the college. But I was on the main floor down there. The cafeteria was at that far end. The welding shop was across the hall. I'll never forget Mike Herrick as long as I live. When it was break time, he went out in the hallway and whammed this big gong And he was always up for a joke. He was a neat guy. So let's see. That's pretty much how I got involved in OPSEU. Maxine Jones was a significant influence, encouraged me to come to some local meetings back in the 70s, around when they were doing the, free the civil servants when we became OPSEU. So I did a few demonstrations with her, and I think that was sort of the movement that and the combination of the being on the bargaining OPSEU bargaining team. I was on the bargaining team from 82 to 86, 81 to 86. Yeah, I was elected to the executive board of OPSEU. And I ran a couple of campaigns. I was contracted to OPSEU, ran a couple of campaigns. One was when the pension, they wanted to increase pension deductions by 1%. I was involved in that. I ended up on the Provincial Women's Committee. So my kind of history with local was I was local president, and we did I think a pretty good job of creating a good labor relations environment. One of the contacts that I will never forget was Dan Lozon. He was the kind of the liaison to the president's office around support staff stuff. And I spent countless hours arguing with him about different issues and how to deal with people who had some difficulties. There was a few along the way that had some emotional issues or some physical issues, and we spent a lot of time arguing out and working out a fair and reasonable deal for people. Our employee relations committee, we rotated the stewards through those meetings so they got to understand how the relationship with the college worked, so that there was a support, and we held regular meetings and people brought up issues and we were able to resolve them. I can't remember very many grievances that we had. I remember I think my first or my most famous exchange with the college was wage and price controls. That was in Toronto in '82, and I, along with a lot of other activists, went to Queen's Park for a demonstration because we didn't think 9 and 5 was a very good wage increase. And the first day we were there, there was a protest in the galleries, and we wore T-shirts that said, each had a letter, "No controls," and we ultimately were asked to leave the gallery. And the next day, our bargaining chair and vice chair were off to some meeting at Queen's Park. I forget what it was. And we were told, meaning there was 4 of us on the bargaining team, to go to Queen's Park, to sit in the gallery and just observe, show that we're reasonable, normal, healthy, simple people, just workers from the college. Well, I think we all wore OPSEU T-shirts, but they just said OPSEU on them, and a little triangle, our vest. And I got up and left to go to the washroom. And when I went back, I attempted to go back and sit down, one of the security guards said that I couldn't go in. And I said, what do you mean I can't go in? I was just there. My friends are there. I'm sitting there. No, can't go in unless you take off your T-shirt, which said OPSEU, which they thought was some kind of nasty organization. I don't know. So anyway, what I did was I went downstairs and I got a hold of Dave Cook. And I said, Dave, you know, I was sitting up there minding my own business and they've kicked me out. And so he said, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll get you into he has the special gallery there for invited guests. I'll get you to sit in there. So he went to the sergeant at arms and said, I want my guest to be in there. Oh, no. She can't come in. She's a threat to the safety and security of the house. So I said, well, what are we going to do? Dave says, leave it with me. I'm out in the hallway. He goes in and raises the issue with the Speaker of the House. And they ultimately have to have a vote on whether or not to let me in.
So they rang the bells to get everybody back.
And the bells rang, and it took, probably 45 minutes till everybody that's in their offices can get back on the floor because there's going to be a vote. So meanwhile, the media has figured, what the ham's going on here? So they come down and talk to me. And I said, well, see, I have this T-shirt on. It says OPSEU on it. And there's nothing strange about it. And I said, they want me to take it off, but I don't have anything underneath of it, so I can't take it off. So anyway, the bells rang, and they voted to uphold the chair of the House, and I never got back in. But the publicity was extremely negative for the Progressive Conservative Party of the day, because when it came out, they saw what it was, and we hadn't done anything, and our friends are sitting up there with the shirts on, and so there's a picture of them and a picture of me out there, and anyway, that was my claim to fame. The Windsor Star said tails out to whatever it said, and my daughter at the time was 16 years old. And she was so mad at me. How dare you? Because she had a teacher who in her, what class was that called? Not history, but the political science, like a political science course. And he was right into this, he was an NDP fella from Amherstburg, and, he was just, talking to Lori, and she wanted to crawl under the desk. Just absolutely was so mad at me because all of this hoopla, and she's, the 16-year-old kid, and my mother doesn't have anything on her shirt. But anyways, that's the way it went. A little story about Quinton. He knew everybody by their first name. Charlie Jackson couldn't remember your name if his life depended on it, but Q knew everybody. And after he had left the college, I don't remember exactly what year it was now, but I hit a train over on EC Row, and it was in the Globe and Mail. And he called me to see if I was okay. He was out in BC at the time, so he had a heck of a memory, that man. I got along very, very well with Bruce. We had some significant disagreements, but by and large, he was open to listen. His door was always open. If you had a problem and an issue, you got up there and he would talk to you, and I respected him a lot. Q and McCausland were the two that I had much to do with. I learned a lot. I mean, I got to take courses for free. At the end, I ended up with a reasonable pension. I left the college and went to work for OPSEU for about 89. About 15 years. And the college was, it's amazing what it is today compared to what it was back then. I mean, there was the only thing that was open when I first started the college was the first floor. There was no B building, no C building, no nothing else. There was the temporaries across the street, and that was about all there was of the college. So to walk around today and see it, it's like, wow, amazing institution.